Welcome to the Storied Way Perspective. My name is Rituparna Ghosh, and I'm your host, your anchor, and your co traveler in the world of stories. In each episode, I bring you voices of experts who are changing the world through the power of stories and storytelling. For the first time on this podcast, we have two wonderful guests waiting to share their perspective, and I'm thrilled to have them with me today. Natasha Badhwar is an Indian author, columnist, filmmaker, journalist, and media trainer. She has written the books My Daughter's Mom and Immortal for a Moment. Raju Tai is a writer, writing facilitator, curriculum designer, and a creativity coach. She's passionate about writing and facilitating workshops and experiences in which women and teens tap into their transformative power of their creativity. Natasha and Raju together are the co anchors, mentors, and writing coaches at the Ochre Sky Memoir Workshops. They also host and steer Ochre Sky circles for writers who come together to write stories of their lives and make sense of it. I joined one of their workshops last year in 2024 when writing sort of tugged me towards it, and I got one of Natasha's newsletters in my inbox, and like every time she'd send, I'd read them very passionately, very slowly, at taking my time off to enjoy that reading. And something in me stirred and said, "You have to join this." And I went and joined it. I had a wonderful time. But the most beautiful thing that I experienced was this beautiful community that they had put together. And I've been wanting to have them on the podcast. And so I have Natasha and Raju. Welcome. How are you feeling today?
Hello. It's absolutely lovely to be here. And I was just thinking to myself, what a great way to start 2025.
Yes.
Be in a room like this where you ask us questions and we get to think about and ruminate on why we do what we do. So it's really lovely to be here.
So let's ask that question. Why do you do what you do? Why writing memoir? Why are you bringing people together to unpack the stories of their lives? Tell us about the magic for a lot of people who have not been into your workshop and may consider joining a writing workshop. It's not just a writing workshop where they teach you to write. That's one of the biggest misconceptions that somebody should know. Somebody asked me that do they teach you how to write? I said, no, they don't teach you how to write. They won't tell you anything about the technique or a definition of how to write a plot. They will just give you a space to write. And that's one of the biggest things that they can do. But not from the participant point of view. Why don't you, as the hosts and anchors of Ochre Sky, tell our listeners what is Ochre Sky Stories all about?
I'll invite Raju to start.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, I think that you're right that it is not the writing that we teach, but to let go of all the things that come in the way of writing. So, creating a space where it becomes an obvious thing to do. Like, what do you do with your life experience? You write about it. You explore it through words, maybe through art, maybe through rhythm. That what it is that your life has led to. Where are you at this point? Where were you a few years back? Where are you headed? So, sort of using writing as a tool to not only create pieces of writing, but to see yourself, to create yourself also in a new way. So that's what we are witnessing happening in front of us. That decisions get taken after a few weeks of writing, because you know yourself so well after a few weeks of writing from the deepest part, that you're like, oh, why was I doing this? Why was I not doing that? And these kind of small effects of writing together, not giving in to the inner critic who is always telling us that this is too much, this is too weird or personal or intimate or shameful, and sort of getting through it. And we are also growing so much when we write with our writers, because when they show so much courage, it is contagious.
I love the way you said that it's a tool to create yourself. You agree, Natasha?
Absolutely. It was so lovely to hear Raju put it so succinctly and to really kind of take out the essence of what the experience has been. I absolutely agree. One of the words that we don't like, we don't use, is teaching. And we don't use it even in classroom contexts. a teacher, and so am I. And we've both worked extensively with young adults, with adolescents and teenagers. And even in those spaces where you are technically a teacher, the attempt and the constant, the long term journey is to not see two people as teacher and student, is to not see one as, a portal of a kind of knowledge, and the other as somebody who doesn't, as an ignorant person. So, what we believe very firmly, and it is born from our own experience, and it is something that, that the greatest thinkers, educationists have also said, is that it's really all within you. And we connect to a teacher or a guru or a mentor when we recognize in them what we aspirationally want ourselves to become, and when they recognize in us that we are just on a different part of the same journey, and that by being in a learning environment, by being in an environment where we are willing to be vulnerable, where we are willing to acknowledge that we don't know it all, but that we have the tools within us that can help us put it together. And there are ways in which those tools can be recognized, those tools can be practiced. Yeah. So if someone said, do you teach writing? I wouldn't say we don't teach writing. I would say we are not going to assume that you don't know what it is that you want to do and you don't know how to do it. We are going to create an environment, like Raju said, in which you will summon your inner courage, in which the barriers that have, and they're common to all of us, socialization, schooling, parenting culture, etiquette, class mannerisms, they're common to all of us, right? This is the way to speak, this is what you must keep to yourself, this is a part of you that needs to be hidden, it would be shameful to let it out. And all of that is coming in the way of being authentic, and all of that is coming in the way of us living, our fuller lives. And because we have experienced it ourselves, that writing is one of the writing, and so many more writing adjacent things, like movement, like meditation, like breathing, like performance, like using the body, are ways in which we are able to close the gap between who we are and who we allow to be seen in the world. And when that gap is closed, we just feel that much more liberated and that much more powerful.
I've been working with personal stories for a while now, and that was one of the reasons which drew me to your workshop, is because I enable people to sort of sort their lives and identify moments which have shaped them to be who they are. And I've seen very powerful and vulnerable moments when people have, very simple prompt or an exercise takes them to the most hardest or the harshest memory of their life, or a hardest period in their life. And I've seen grown up men tell those stories and break down and cry. And it happened in a corporate workshop. All the other colleagues of this gentleman went and hugged him, and it was like an out of body experience for them, because they've never seen each other like that. They never shared that story before, even to their own family. But there was this one simple moment, a simple prompt like, "Tell me of a time when your sibling taught you something in life." And that was a prompt, and I remember it, and it brought out such a powerful story. And they asked, this guy turned around to another person. He said, "What's happening? What's happening to us?" I said, "Nothing. Stories are happening because I didn't ask you to find that difficult moment. Your mind naturally went back to that moment which you've not spoken about with anyone, and that in that safe space that you have created for each other, that story wanted to come out and be heard, and that just flowed." I don't know about you, but I'm sort of, because since you are also working with a large number of people who are sorting their life stories, is there a life and stage in a person's life when they want to slow down and ponder and reflect on their life's many moments, and make sense of it. I know a lot of people who say, this is too much of work. I can't. What's happened, it's happened. I don't care about it. Who cares about it in any way? I don't want to go back because I predict that there are some layers of inhibition and self hate and self loathing, or maybe a sort of disenchantment with their own lives or disconnection, which they don't want to go back to. But at many times, people think it is not for them. So I'm asking you the question, at what stage in a person's life do they seek a writing circle like yours, a writing workshop like yours, when they want to make sense of their life stories and they want to reflect and write about it?
Just answer because I also attended Natasha's workshop as a participant before I joined as a co-facilitator. Maybe there is a age slash stage where there might be a slowing down that's happening or reflecting, but for me, I know it came much early, and I know that I know of many people younger than me, so it's basically irrespective of age. It's more about when you are tired of pretending, and I think that though I don't think I ever pretended, but you don't know how you're pretending. In today's world, you pretense is so, it's everywhere that you don't even know when you are breathing it and exhaling it and living a pretentious life. And I think that reading one of the writers that Natasha had seen in the workshop, the writing is what brought on that stage for me. Or maybe I was in a stage where I had, anyways quit a job that did not suit me. So I was maybe already taking some courage leads to some more courage, leads to some more courage. It's sort of that chain reaction. So when I saw that piece of writing, I remembered that, oh my God, is it possible to write about our own lives? And I wrote an email to Natasha saying that, I want to write from a deeper place. It feels like I'm just, hovering around in the shallow layers of life. And I feel that there is so much in my subconscious, there's so much in my body, there's so much in my dreams even that feels untapped, uh, unaccessed. And I have an intuition that your workshop will lead me there. And it did much more than that. But the fact that we had a workshop like this, it still blows my mind. Even though I have been on this side also, where people have said the same thing for to like written the same kind of message that this happened, that your workshop did this, did that. I'm still amazed that it happened to me too, and that it can happen to all of us.
Yeah.
And it's still like I still feel the joy of wanting that authentic part of you and finding it. So I think that is the stage that I feel like we need the workshop when we want to be ourselves.
I think that's why
Yeah.
it's very powerful that you have that workshop available to you. You come to us when you think you are ready for it. Is that what also Natasha feels?
Yeah, I was actually reminded of a psychologist whose name has now escaped from my brain. It's not Eric Erickson, but it is one of them. And I studied them in my BA in psychology, who said that every 7 years in our life, we go through a churn. So 7, 14, 21, 28, 4, no, whatever, 30. My maths ran out at that point. Uh, we are that the 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 human being reevaluates uh, regularly their life. And in any Ochre Sky workshop, when you go back and you look at even just the screenshots of the participants, there will be at least one person in their 60s, and there'll be at least one person who's between 19 to 21. And we regularly invite some of my students from my graduate students from Ashoka and elsewhere. We have people who do the workshop, and then their adult child will join, who's 21 or 22. We have people who have sent their parents. In the last workshop, we had 3 parents of participants, of previous participants. So we have writer in their 30s and then their parent in their 60s is arriving, and vice versa. We have a parent in their 50s and their daughter or son in their 20s is arriving. And in fact, the latest person who's joining is 19. And we also kind of worry about how we can have this kind of range of people going through an experience that is likely to make them tell stories, share stories, which uh, socializing tells us that a 19-year-old shouldn't be listening to this kind of vulnerability from a 50-year-old. And a 50-year-old shouldn't be, that a 19-year-old won't be able to speak in front of a 50-year-old. And then constantly we find that the dynamics of the group are such, the dynamics of the space are such that people are holding each other, and they are being able to respond to them even more effectively than Raju and I are being able to. Obviously, Raju and I are stretched and we are a little anxious about it. And we also find that that because you have the tag of facilitator, that a little bit of what you are saying to your participant is getting cut out by their critical voice, which is saying, I paid them to be nice to me. But when they get the same thing from other participants who have no stake, and the generosity and the openness with which they hold each other, in which they respond to each other, has just it's been a very, very amazing experience for us. And it's really something that I know that I was very wary of, that I took a very long time, at least 6 months before I began to open more and more, letting participants interact with each other openly without any kind of controls, because after all it's an online workshop. It's once your emails have been exchanged and everybody knows where the other is, there aren't that many boundaries that you can control. And yet it's been amazing how intergenerational people have connected with each other. So I would, with kind of great confidence, say that there is no age. And in fact, I also want to share the example of the one workshop that Raju facilitated, which was the first workshop that she facilitated, where we invited only young adults. So the age group was, we said 12 to 19. And I know that we kept 19 because my oldest daughter was 19 at that time and we wanted to fit her in. Otherwise, we would have stopped at 18, probably. And we had mothers writing in and saying, my daughter's 9, but she's 12, and she's 10.
Mentally.
And, will you read their writing sample and see if you'll accept them? And the kind of work these, in our minds, children did, the kind of work, it was amazing. I think it was in many ways the storytelling, the joy that they experienced, the leaps that they made in terms of confidence and self affirmations was in many ways even greater than what adults have done. But their motivation was higher. They learned to trust, they opened up with trust much faster. And even though they were, post pandemic adolescents, very, very silent, very, very seemingly secretive. But when they wrote and when they shared, it was just, it made you realize how many lazy stereotypes we hold about very young people.
Oh, I'm getting goosebumps listening to this, and I want to sort of um, read what children would have written. For the uninitiated, for those who are listening to us have this conversation and have no idea what is memoir and what is writing, what is a memoir writing workshop all about? Would you define, or sort of not define is a bad word. Would you sort of describe what a memoir looks like and what it does for the writer and also what it does for the reader? Because a lot of times people may write their memoir as a personal exercise. Some may also take it out in the world. There are very famous memoirs which are found in bookshelves. So I'm sure somebody would know. It's like writing an autobiography, it's writing a biography. What is it? I mean, who cares for my autobiography? Who cares for my biography? So just to sort of dispel all of that misinformation or myth around a memoir, would you describe it for our listeners in a way?
So I'll take a go at it first and then I'll invite Raju to add.
Yeah.
The two phrases that come immediately to my mind and which we have used also. One is writing from your life. When we give a prompt, when we share a prompt with our writers, we add the line any genre. Let it be poetry, let it be fiction, non-fiction, poetic prose, anything that you want, anything, because we don't want to go into literary rules. The whole point of writing from your life, writing authentically, is to not assume that there are any rules that allow this and don't allow that. And the other phrase that comes to my mind is stories that demand to be told. What is our life except also, a collection of stories that have a beginning, middle, and end, stories that connect with other stories. And we have such a great regard for literary fiction or fiction. And what is it except a representation of how lives are lived? A writer is trying so hard to write authentic characters. And who are we? We are authentic characters. So, memoir is the space that brings us back to our own lives and encourages us to write from our own life. Poetry can be memoir, essays can be memoir, book length writing can be memoir. And now we would earlier say collection of essays. I know even my daughter's mom in its literary genre category is essays. And I know that it's only been 6 years, but today the category would be memoir essays and memoir in essays. So memoir is really it's a genre that is coming of age. We often repeat that we are living in the age of, and that's because the stories that are anthropologists and sociologists and psychologists and psychiatrists and the scientific community has worked on, the literary community has worked on, to be able to represent what real life is like, is one way in which it is done. And another way is in assuming the agency to tell the story of your own life, drawing from psychology, sociology, science, research,
Right.
and references from fiction, and yet situated authentically in your own life. And that's an incredibly rich genre, as we know from its popularity, from its growing, practice.
Right. Right. It's very liberating. I mean, when listening to you, I sort of said that sometimes we don't lead, I mean, we don't live lives with so much of freedom because our lives are sort of governed by, like you mentioned, society, parents, our education or lack of it, or however, and we don't have the liberty to lead our lives in a certain way. But the moment you sit down to ponder or reflect on your own life's experiences, and you walk into a workshop where it says there are no rules, so you just we give you complete freedom to sort of interpret your story in the way you want. This kind of freedom is sort of very intimidating, and suddenly you don't know what to do with it. And
Yeah.
that's where I think that freedom sort of makes you sort of walk into unknown territories and figure out your own voice for the first time. I think
And yet,
that's what
in
happens to a lot of.
a somewhat invisible way, there are rules.
Yeah. Ah, yes. Okay.
And we model those rules. So when we choose what we are reading, when we give you a certain time period, a time in which to
To
write,
write.
for a prompt, when we give you a deadline, there are rules.
Oh my God,
But
I have so many of those unfinished time, a 3 minute writing period, and suddenly my mind wanders, and I'm like quickly scribbling. And most of them were like unfinished, and I said, no, no, let me spend some
but
time
it's
finishing it.
beginning, right?
Yes, yes. And that's what you realize that if you put a person into a bucket and say that you just make sense of this word or this phrase or this scene in 3 minutes, your mind sort of runs away in so many directions that you want to sort of capture it in the truest form. Raju, what is memoir?
Hmm.
Building on to what Natasha just described.
I seriously am amazed at how the definition keeps expanding.
Yeah.
And through, I mean, when I saw that it is a memoir workshop, I don't know what drew me to that word, but I somehow just realized that it isn't about even memories. Like it can be so much beyond memories, like just the logical connection between memoir and memories. But it's so much more, and it just every week essays come in and disrupt the idea of memoir in my mind, that okay, this can also be memoir, that can also be memoir. And then someday you read an essay and you had thought that, oh, an essay, a memoir essay should have this, and it doesn't have it, and you're like, wow. And it is the same is true for poetry. So I feel like these things are best not defined, because the more I try to define them, the more it tells me that no, I can be this also and I can be that also. And it's beautiful to have things that are so expansive, because we have been told that every art form is, we have been told the narrowest definition of an art form, be it poetry, be it memoir, be it even fiction for that matter, or even, what is good painting, good drawing. We thought that good drawing, as children, we thought that it's drawing the exact thing. And when we saw Pablo Picasso, we felt cheated, because he's not drawing the exact thing, and he's the best artist. And the only one person in the class who can draw neat lines is being celebrated for their art, whereas the rest of us have equally innocent and tender expressions of what art is. So just like art, poetry, memoir is also such an expansive field of creation, field of self connection, that why would we want to restrict it by defining it?
Yeah. I also want to bring that element which you mentioned in an earlier question, that the path to writing may not be just through words, it could be through movement, it could be through art, it could be listening to a piece of music. And in our workshop, you took us through different exercises which led us to write something. Sometimes it was just a piece of music, listen to it, or move your body, and what comes out of it, then write down. Could you describe that? What leads you to create those experiences for your writers, and whether it's watching a piece of clip maybe, or reading somebody else's essay, or listening to a piece of music, or even doodling, scribbling. You made us do all kinds of things. So describe that. What sort of pathways do you follow to get people to write about a story from their life that demands to be told? So take us through that.
Raju.
I know Raju does this. I know this has fallen on Raju's lap.
I mean, I'm very close to it to be able to
Yeah.
describe the process. And again, it is expanding every week, every session. But that it is, I don't know. I've not met a writer who is not a creative person. I've met creative people who are not interested in writing, maybe, but any creative person can write. Any person can write, and any creative person is has the tools to start writing right away, because they have other art forms. And that I haven't met a writer who isn't creative in some other aspect. But to be a serious writer, to be a person, a serious professional, they have probably left those things aside. And they have, if not left it aside, they've created compartments. Oh, this is my tennis compartment. This is my, this is my compartment where I go and dance sometimes with my friends. This is a compartment in which I draw. But, I only draw this thing in this way. But these are the compartments that we have to completely, destroy in order to create a fluidity of the mind, and to allow that fluidity to just flow. And the creative block is never just a block of words. You are often moving less. You are often, allowing yourself to make mistakes less. You're not really allowing your pen to just move randomly. So a writer's block, if you look at it, is a block in so many ways. So why wouldn't we move? Why wouldn't we draw? Even small things like just taking 3 deep breaths has changed the way a writing space looks like, even if it is with ourselves or in the session with the group. We know that these are chemical reactions, and we just have to like really surrender to it, because in the beginning, who likes to be told that, okay, now we are going to dance? I mean, some people do, and thankfully we have some of them who encourage the rest of us to dance. But most people start with a reluctance, a hesitation, because we are caged and masked in so many ways that that also is not allowing the writing to flow. And once we start moving, once we start drawing with our, shivering hands and move with our stiff bodies, magic starts to happen. And then we get to see the benefits in writing, that my writing is flowing a sentence more here. There's a sound to my writing. There's visual nature to my writing. I'm being funny because I allowed my drawing to be funny, which I don't otherwise allow anything to be funny or silly. So yeah, it just amazes me that it is all connected, and we do that in the workshop, and especially on Fridays when we do our writing circles, uh, we allow more and more exploration, because now everyone trusts the process because they've been in the workshops for long enough to trust and to surrender. And then we do crazier things, and then there's a crazier amount of trust in what we do. And then some amazing writing comes, and we are like, okay, we wanted something amazing to happen, but we did not know it will be this amazing. So yeah, I will take a deep breath now and ask
Nobody walks in
Natasha to
right.
say.
Nobody walks into a writing workshop assuming to dance. Like they're not ready to, like, okay, we have to dance, but we thought we have to write.
Yeah. Sometimes when we feel like there's going to be a certain amount of resistance, we don't even call it dance. We're like,
Yeah.
okay, just moving your right leg. Now you're moving your left leg. Now you're moving your hip. And now you're moving your shoulder. And lo and behold, you're moving your body. And that's what it is. And in a very fundamental sense, these are grounding exercises. They
Yeah.
bring you back to the body. They let out the stress, the stiffness. I mean, even as I was listening to Raju, I was stretching
Mm.
because I was listening to words like unmasking and uncaging the self. And I was like, okay, I'm sitting in a podcast and it's a formal thing. And I'm kind of trying to hold my position, my posture. Why would I not let it flow freely? What am I afraid will happen, will come out of me? And, so in a sense, you're just letting go of inhibitions, and that's going to show up that much more beautifully in anything you create after that.
No, I'm completely up for, breaking the format, breaking the mold in terms of experiences are concerned. So yes, sometime down the line in this podcast, we'll do podcast on the go, just sort of follow people doing what they do and then make sure that I get an episode out. But I don't know whether you remember that, because we talked about body and all of that. Our workshop, I had a very funny incident, and I want to
Yeah.
sort of tell it to the world, because I think Raju and Natasha know a bit of it, and the rest of the cohort knows. In our particular workshop, she played a music, very nice, lovely music, and I'm in a hotel, and my mother's lying down in the bed next to me, and she's like dozing off. I have headphones, and now I'm dancing and I'm moving and all of that, and all that dancing, moving, and being a performance storyteller, movement is very good for me, and I'm very comfortable in my body, so that is it's not a first time. But where I was in a writing workshop, my mind was sort of drifting away. Where is this going to go? What is she going to make us write about after the dancing and the movement ends? And then the prompt she gives is, tell us of a time when you felt alive in your body. And my mind went wild to all the times when I felt alive in my body, and I decided to write a raunchy piece about the first time I was with my husband, then boyfriend. He wasn't even my boyfriend then. He would become my boyfriend after whatever happened. And I wrote about it. And I was wondering, while I'm writing, I have to read it aloud. My mom is here. I don't want her to listen to it. And in the workshop, it just happened. I got thrown out of the Zoom room, and I was suddenly so grateful that I don't have to read it aloud. But there I was with my words out on paper, and I wanted to read it out. And I think I would have never written that like that. But
Yeah.
the
Which is
permission
why
to,
it's stories that demand to be told. We don't know what's going
yes,
on.
yes, right.
It's sitting there, it gets a release.
Yes, and I said, okay, let's be brave as a writer. Doesn't matter, because this is all about finding. And I said, am I not being brave by not writing it? Is that what I was? I said, no, but this wants to be told right now. So I think that's that experience that Raju and Natasha create for their writers, and it's wonderfully liberating and joyous at the same time, and not having and the relief of not having to read it out with my mom lying next to me in the room was another relief, which I said, okay, fine, now I'm finding it. My safe space is sort of still protected. But yeah, that's amazing. But now, from the writer, we know, I mean, writing about one's space, writing about one's experiences, there's a lot of things. You mentioned the science of it, how our bodies react to our writing, how sort of reflection helps us make sense of the who we are. The Storied Way perspective is designed and developed by your Storybag podcasting network. Podcasting is a fantastic medium that brings listeners to gather around a story. As the podcasting industry grows by leaps and bounds, we at Your Storybag want to help storytellers, businesses, brands, and organizations leverage the power of narrative. We are not an agency. Instead, you can imagine us as a collective or a cohort that incubates and nurtures emerging story based podcasts in the airwaves. If you'd like to collaborate, commission, or create your own story based podcast, reach out to us at podcast@yourstorybag.com. Is there also something of a fatigue that comes in with writing about oneself, having to reflect on one's stories, having to sort of go back and ponder and delve deeper? Have you seen a sense of fatigue in people?
Okay, I'll take this first, being the veteran memoirist.
Yes, you should answer that.
I have written consistently for 10 years, week after week, brought out the books. And I have also chosen, wasn't it last year, July, to stop writing my columns. So I stopped writing the Tribune, and then I stopped writing in the Morning Context. And I even began to say no to one-off invitations. There was a new column offered to me, and I kept it on hold, that I'll come back to it. Is it fatigue that stops me? I wouldn't use fatigue as a word, but I think that there are seasons, and that just as there is a season of harvest, there is a time to lie fallow, which is as nurturing as the other. There's a rhythm. There's a rhythm to life, to the body, that nothing in our schooling and socializing teaches us. We have rhythms imposed on us. This is the English period, now this is the chemistry period, now this is the examination, now you must graduate, now you must work, now you must sleep, eat, etc. So everything is a little, I mean, order is needed, and but sometimes it goes too far, and your there's a gap between your personal rhythm and that which is demanded of you by the world. And we are very, very, very of recognizing our personal rhythm, because the fear of being left out, the fear of, if I quit something, did I fail? Because quitting is associated with failure, right? The term burnout is something that we're using a lot, perhaps overusing. Maybe it's okay to be tired. Maybe it's okay. I mean, you didn't take a break, right?
Hmm.
And with our devices, with our connected lives, we are studying in the UK, but we're also doing a full-time job here, and we're also socializing, and we're also keeping up with our Instagram, and it can be a lot. So to take a break, I think it is important to listen to your body when it wants to stay silent, is as much a part of writing as the part when the words are flowing. And I would equate these things. And I think there's an essay somewhere where I've got, it's in the book as well. Reading is also writing, running is writing, knitting is writing, cooking is writing, gardening is writing. And they don't necessarily need to be framed as a loss of one when one chooses the other. It's just that something is celebrated as high art, and so many other things are feminized and domesticized, and not framed as the same. So I feel that what the body seeks to do is find wholeness again. If your column is successful and now you are continuing to write it, and there comes a point where you need silence in this part of your life, And maybe you want to do something else with your fingers, maybe you want to do something else. And for me, that changed from constant column writing to constant workshop facilitating and reading other people. And I know that it's where one part will stay fallow and come back more fertile in the way that it needs to be. So I would say that often we may mistake one phase for another because of the way that we are made to feel.
Yeah.
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 I know that when I quit my big shit TV job, there was one part that was saying, you're a loser.
Mm,
And then there was another part that was saying, this is I am reclaiming every other part of me. And I know it feels like I'm starting from zero, but
yeah.
it's a very, very important and relevant decision for me. Yeah. And I know Raju starts and stops a lot, so I'd love to hear from her.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the seasons that Natasha was saying, and literally for women, it's happening every month also. That I read about a writer who, designs her writing schedule in sync with her periods. So she knows that she will be able to draft more in a certain time of the month and edit more at some other part of the month. So people are, listening to the rhythms that Natasha was telling us about. That there are these personal rhythms. There's a personal rhythm of you as a being, as a spirit, or as you. And then there's a rhythm of the body. Then there's a rhythm of the of the seasons, of the nature around you. So I think that I am really at the very beginning of listening to my own rhythms. It's like barely audible to me sometimes, but slowly as you hear it and as you unschool and as you actually ask yourself, okay, what is your rhythm? It takes a long time to trust yourself with it, because when is something an excuse or a inner critic trying to play tricks with you to not write something, and when is it that you actually need rest, and that you have shown so much courage in the past few weeks or few months, so it's okay, take this time off and maybe do something else instead. Do the opposite thing. If you've written something profound, go write something silly. That is a way of taking rest. It doesn't have to mean that you stop writing altogether. So I think that I'm just at the beginning of really trusting when I'm taking rest, when I'm procrastinating, when I'm and procrastination is also wonderful. It is a way of taking rest. It's just that it gets heavier sometimes, so you want to actually take rest instead of.
No, I also feel that sometimes you need to live your life to be able to,
Mm,
you know, be able to sort of say that no, I'm constantly reflecting, but I'm not living. Whether it's the newer experiences that you're missing out on because you're so much living in your past, your present is sort of
yeah.
withering, and it's not, it doesn't, it's seeking attention from you, so that you're more mindful of how your body feels, how you respond to people and your relationships. So sometimes you have to stop living in the past and making sense of the past to be more present in the present. And that's how I articulate it for a lot of people, that we are all living in a story. And sometimes your present is a little more urgent. It's pulling you towards it, like how Natasha says, want to sort of do other things to even write. I mean, if writing is reflection for you, maybe go take a run or cook something and reflect while doing that, because that would be another way of nourishing yourself, putting yourself in another experience. Let's talk about the reader. Now, through Ochre Sky, you have created a wonderful community of writers, but you've also nurtured a community of readers. And this space that you have created is sort of very infectious. It's very warm. It's very rewarding. And sometime back, Natasha mentioned about how they read every essay during the workshop and they give their feedback. I remember waiting for a little note from them after my essay was submitted, because the writing was very joyful, but reading their not, I will not call it feedback, but their reading of it, they shared the reading of the essay, and what they took away was more rewarding because they noticed things which I wasn't intentionally trying to say. And that kind of quote unquote feedback or that loop that you created with your readers was so joyous, because we all learned to do that. We learned, even when somebody was reading out their essay, we learned to, let's say, pick out these lovely lines, the descriptions that people did, and then how that made us feel. So let's talk about, how do readers respond to memoir in your workshops, in your writing circles?
Yeah. You know, the question that we answer when we read our writers, and the question that we want, that we invite others to answer, is how, what did it do to you? How did it make you feel? What did it remind you of? So that's literally three questions. But and because they're distinct, what did it remind you of in your own life? How did it make you feel? Because emotions are welling up, and sometimes you're surprised. I mean, the amount of crying we do, reading essays that have come to us in the email between sessions, two prompts. Sometimes we'll just quickly WhatsApp a note to the other person, sit down before you read this one. Because I've read it on the go and I've got a flood of tears and I just want to prepare Raju for it. And or Raju will send me a little, note. It doesn't take a lot of words for us to communicate with each other. So, just so a lot of welling up when we are reading essays for the first time between sessions, a lot of welling up during the session. And what do tears mean? I mean, we really kind of encourage them to flow in the workshop. They mean that we are allowing ourselves to feel our feelings authentically, and that there is, and that famous sher by Faiz, I think, कौन रोता है किसी और के, the tears that flow are because you are reminded of your own grief. It is, somebody else is telling the story of something, of their loss, but the tears that are flowing when we are hearing it or reading it are because we are anticipating or being reminded of our own sense of loss. And in that sense, it's a release. But because we are taught to be embarrassed of tears, to be shameful, that tears are uncomfortable, and we want to kind of claim them as in the repertoire of acceptable things, just like laughing too loudly is not to be done, letting your tears flow is not to be done. So we're kind of staying in that very narrow band of expression, and it's very important to allow ourselves safely, entirely without boundaries, but safely within a community, be able to express that. So so our response to, as readers, is, this is what it reminded me of, this is what I felt when I read this. And of course we are able to see connections because we are not nervous about what will emerge in someone else's life, right? But each one of us is nervous about our own. We are so scared of naming our resentments, of unleashing our suppressed anger. We were afraid of consequences. We are afraid of what it might tell us or look like. And the whole point of memoir is to normalize all of that. I mean, just because I am raging at my husband does not mean that I don't deserve to have a love relationship with him. But somehow all of these things have become so linear. They have been thrust into binaries. Is it a good marriage or a bad marriage? Just tell me one thing.
Yeah.
And this is it's how we kind of narrow down the space in which we can exist, and that begins to hurt, that so we are carrying all these untended wounds within us. And similarly, we are carrying all these unexpressed joys within us. And then one of the whole thing about, and I think your example was so brilliant, that you moved to music, and then you didn't know what the prompt was, but the prompt was, when did you feel alive in your body? And one of the most brilliant highs of your life comes back in its full glory. How much we loved to hear it eventually when we did hear it. So, yeah, also claiming the joys, the happiness, the small things that make us feel alive, that give us the biggest highs of our life. And that's what we want to focus on in anybody's writing, and that's what we want as a reader. Not, I read, is it a good essay or a medium essay or a bad essay? Is it good writing? What did the story do to you? That's what tells us the value of that writing.
And it's infectious, isn't it? This give and take, this sort of energy exchange between the writer and the reader, and the mutual love or admiration of the courage, of the honesty, of the vulnerability, of the truthfulness of, let's say, human experiences, whatever people read in each other's writings. Is that the reason why you thought of Ochre Sky circles, where your writers meet over a larger period of time to uh, sort of engage with each other's writing and write together? Because writing, we know, is a very solitary journey. That's a very classical way of looking at what writing can be all about. And memoir writing can also be something very self-indulgent, or maybe even overwhelming to be left alone with all the time. I think you've sort of created a very wonderful community space, which makes writing a community exercise, number one, and also not so, let's say, lonely that you suddenly get lost in your own memories and you're finding it difficult to come back and make sense of what you are trying to say. That's my description of what a circle could be potentially for a participant. Tell us about your writing circles.
Raju, you want to go for it?
Yeah, I think that while the workshop saw as a new way to trust ourselves, to begin something, but the circles is where we learn to trust the world. And it doesn't happen like you trust the entire world all at once, but you trust these few people who have come together. I feel like I need to trust myself as a writer, but I also need to trust the world. And that happens when there is a small piece of the world given to me in a safer space. And then I'm like, okay, if these people get it, if these people appreciate something I thought was ugly, then maybe the world also will not, reject me. So what the circle does is give you a possibility of acceptance, of belonging, which you may or may not have had earlier, either in your family or your friends. Even if you had it, it was for a different part of you. But this part of you that likes to create, that likes to reflect, that likes to transform experiences into something tangible, something that we can hold, that part of you never got seen, never got accepted. And here is a group of people who also are signing up to do the exact same thing, and regularly and consistently. And maybe they will be getting asked that, okay, Friday evenings you're not partying, you're sitting and writing. But then they can say that, you know what, this is also a party, and this is a party with my own people. And here we do the kind of dancing that we want to do. you know so I think it is creating us to party, to sometimes go into this pool party of tears coming out, and sometimes it'll be like a splash of fun and sound and image, some poetry, some drawing. So we are really co-creating a community where even we feel like, wow, such people exist. And I think Natasha and I don't think we thought that these things would happen, that people would meet in different cities, and people would continue the circle on their own. People would plan retreats and, for a second round of the writing circle. I don't think any of this was on our Google Doc where we plan the circles. But what was there was that, a community that supports each other, that has fun together, that encourages each other. And I think it's beautiful to see it happen.
So, for the listeners who are listening to this wonderful description of the workshops and the circles, you can meet the writers on Substack. You will find a lot of Orchestra writers writing a wonderful, powerful, moving Substack newsletters. And Orchestra itself brings out a weekly digest of some of the best stories from their writers and sums it up and shares it with their readers. Substack, I mean, is another space. I think from writing for self to finding a community which welcomes your stories, welcomes the experiences that you've had, to bring a private space in your through your workshops and circles. I think the whole part of taking those stories out into the world and having another space for it, which is a digital world where writers again connect, communicate, and share with each other, is also giving a lot of freedom to writers. I love Substack. And for any new follower, I have sort of tried to look at it. Okay, this one is also a Ochre Sky writer. This one is also has done a workshop through Natasha and Raju. And yeah, I think it's again building a space which is much wider than what you started. I think that's what it has done. So tell us about the need for a writer to take what at what stage do writers have the confidence to take their writing to a larger audience, an unknown audience this time, and then find acceptance and space in the world wide web for that matter.
Yeah. So, when we started, Substack wasn't so big. I had a Substack of my own and a Medium account, and of course, Facebook and Twitter hadn't gone downhill as they have in the last 2 years. So I was using it all. And what we were hearing from writers quite consistently was, that it's a stage by stage thing. First, you need a safe space in which you can practice the courage to write from a really authentic part of you. And you need to stay in that safe space for some time so that it isn't a one time thing. You're able to practice that voice, and you're able to also get an idea of the variety of stories that are coming from you. So when you are done with neglect and abuse and betrayal and loss and grief, it also kind of, once some of these really heavy things that you have never shared with anyone get out, there's an unclogging of your creative pipes. And then you also want, your body seeks lightness, and you will then write about your highs and your humor and the comedy and love and forbidden love, all of the other things that you keep to yourself because you're not exactly the kind of person who commands great audiences in parties while they tell their stories. So you need ample time and space to see what is it that wants to come out of me. And then you wonder, now what do I do with this? I'm not ready. Who wants to hear it outside of these nice people I met in the workshop? And so when we had a large number of people who had done the workshops themselves but were still a bit unsure about where they go out, we began to then encourage writers to come on Substack. And it really started with the first circle, which is about a year and a half since the workshops had actually started. So now they had written together for 3 months. They had given each other a lot of power and energy and joy and appreciation. And at least these 20 people in one circle, when they went out on Substack, say 12 of them went out on Substack, they began to read, and then they bring the links into the Slack group and more people begin. So it's a learning by doing thing. You will take the step and the community is there to hold you. And then they begin to discover readers who are not from the community. Then they begin to discover so many, like you say, you find that most people are connected to Ochre Sky. So I would say now there are lots of writers who, in my head, I can kind of see Ochre Sky writers, Amit Verma writers, and other
Yeah.
writers. So clearly we are like-minded people with similar needs, with very interesting, varied expressions. We are being able to really kind of become a loose community, but a larger community. For a writer, to be able to write is one very important stage. To be able to let it out in the world and go on its own journey, and to have in you the strength to be able to take the silence
Yeah.
or the appreciation or the possible criticism and the rejections that come when people are pitching here and there. All of that kind of needs time and fortification, and it grows. And the more friends and support you have around you, the more you get encouraged. It's what you would get if you went for an MFA, or if you went to a literature course. You would get a community that would build you up, if it's a good community, not pull you down. And so this reading, this sharing, is as important a stage as the writing, but it needs to come at its right time. It needs to be separated from this first stage of feeling safe, and then it begins to blend. So yeah, I
Yeah,
mean,
what I really like is that, sort of the identity of a writer begins with this journey inside, and then finding that, okay, once I step out of my inside and I now look at my world around me a little differently, and I find that, and I shared that before we started recording, is that I realized that there are different pockets of me, and the writer side of me requires a different community. It requires a different audience, and that audience I don't have. I don't know who they are. I don't know who cares for this kind of reflection and writing, but they will come when they have to come. And then, of course, say that now there is a certain need within me to, or a certain purpose, a newfound identity which I want to fulfill, which I want to live, which I want to purposefully follow, and not say, okay, I'll write when I want to write, and not be intentional about it, because it's not just about the readers, but it's also about moving towards a journey where you don't know where it's going to take you, but I need to keep moving and at a pace which I'm very comfortable to. So I think that itself is what the writer's journey would be through Okuskai, or any other writing journey that a writer chooses if they decide to walk through memoirs. And it has to come through one step at a time. I don't know whether the two of you know, I would have written to you, but on 1st of January, restarted another journey which I had since 2022, called 365 Days, 365 Stories. This as a project, every year I sort of spend time in creating a story based resource which enables me to sort of unpack storytelling for myself and for the community I serve. And in 2022, just fresh out of COVID, I'd lost many people in the family and friends. I realized that, our lives sort of wither away, and with that, the stories of that person also go, and we never sort of sit down and share what was memorable in our lives, the many incidents that shape us to be who we are. And I started writing prompts, and at the same time finding stories from my own life which align with those prompts, which sort of come across as, standalone memories which I want to document for myself and for maybe others. And I did that for a year, 365 days, and therefore 365 stories. And then the prompts kept adding and adding and adding. So there are more than 365 prompts. I started sharing it in a small community of people who sort of wanted to work on their own personal stories, did a personal storytelling workshop with people. A lot of my a lot of these prompts have gone into a lot of my storytelling trainings, workshops with different sets of people, audiences, individuals, nonprofits, corporates. And this year I sort of brought it back to Substack, saying that, one, let there be a daily reflection journey to enable people to sort of reflect on their stories, because I felt Substack has that audience, which already has that audience which wants to slow down with stories. So that's my tagline, which is to get people to slow down with the stories in their life. And there's a reason why I wanted to speak to you, because I think you would have great insights into enabling people to work with their personal stories. And I sort of felt that taking inspiration from you would help me keep on this journey, because now I've committed myself to putting out a daily Substack. So that's again another thing. And of course, feed it back into my writing and also bring those stories out, which sort of align with the prompts. So I wanted to share that with you. What future plans for Sky? What plans do you have in 2025 and beyond?
first of all, must pause to completely appreciate and encourage you on this. I mean, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. And, like we've been sharing, you have no idea what it will do,
Yeah, absolutely.
how many lives it will touch, what kind
Yeah.
of transformation it will cause. Um, because that's really, it's not an end goal, but it is what happens. We are transformed by the art we create and the journey that art takes. And it comes back to us and it changes how we see ourselves. It changes how we live, literally. And I mean, all three of us are examples of that
Oh, yes.
in a sense. I mean, it's so wonderful, Rituparna, to actually see you in this avatar of the facilitator. Leslie, kind of going from one topic to another, sharing and creating this space where both of us can talk about it.
Oh, I love this. I love this because I think I love conversations. I love deep conversations, slow conversations. We're not in a hurry to finish. And I think the better stories come out when you allow people to just talk. And that's what I love about your workshops as well. And that's what I try to do through my podcast and my conversation. So I'm glad that you enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah. So what next?
Yes.
We are growing in terms of our pool of facilitators. And literally at this moment, every new facilitator is somebody who has participated in the workshops and the circles. Some of them are coming back, Farjad and Nishi, for example, to facilitate one part of a session, with their unique creative ideas. And some of them are coming back to facilitate entire sessions. So one of the things we did last year was Urdu se Dosti.
Mm.
And my God, the kind of fun we had with it, and the kind of windows and doors that opened within us. And now, building on that, the next thing, the workshop we are starting this year with, and we'll announce it in a couple of days, is a workshop that's going to be facilitated by Raju and Vimal Chitra. And we're calling it Rhythm of Our Stories,
Oh, nice.
because we want to, literally, like your work does, kind of elevate the story. It's not the genre, it's the story. And every story has its own rhythm, it has its own purpose, and it has its own time. So we'll be looking at poetry, memoir, essay, spoken word, all of these genres. So that's the first we're coming back with. Then, of course, the classic Ochre Sky workshop will continue, which we have in March. Lots of requests for offline retreats. The only reason we haven't jumped onto it, there are invitations from people who have retreat locations. Bring your workshop here. And there are requests by writers. Let's go. We are ready. The only reason we haven't done that is because we haven't managed to fit it in
Yeah.
between the online workshops. Last year, we did a workshop in a bookstore in Pune. I did a couple of workshops in bookstores in Delhi. Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of, we're in conversation with universities and companies to organize workshops for them. And because we are very, very comfortable with the slow life, like the slowest decisions are the fastest moving things. No, really,
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, a lot on the cards. And the one thing that we are very mindful of is that we have to stay true to the rhythm of our bodies, our own creativity, and we have to, the joy. We have a draft that we create before we start anything. And we're like, why are we doing this? What do we want from this? And then we make a list of that, and we check in. So long as these are still getting ticked, and joy, friendship, love, peace, these are very, very high on what we want. When a lot of writers will very accusatorily sometimes say, is this a writing workshop or therapy?
Therapy is an outcome. Therapy is an outcome of it. It's not designed like that, but it just happens.
Maybe, but we are so kind of sometimes used to, like, if I'm going to learn something, it must hurt me, because our experience of learning systems has been that it diminishes you in some way before a finer version of you comes out. And to be honest, we are done with that. And we don't.
No, I mean, learning doesn't have to be like the supersonic speed. Learning can be slow. It can be an evolution, and finding going
Yeah,
within to unravel your stories, and then having the confidence or the courage to even share it out with the world, and finding that identity and a voice. It's what the learning journey is once you step into an Orca Sky or workshop. It's not going to happen in those 10 days or 5 days that you're going to do it, right? It's a continuum. I think that's how it is designed to be, and some people stick on with it because once they see the changes within themselves, and some just fall out of the journey because it's not for them. It could be too overwhelming and they'll perhaps return to it when they are ready. Yeah, am I
yeah.
right?
And I mean, one of the things that's very important is, to understand that the ownership of the journey is with the person.
Yes.
and each one will take it on in the way that they do. And even when somebody says no, or feels or expresses that this is a bit overwhelming for me, we know how to slow down, and we know, and we know that if somebody's overwhelmed, then it is something that they really need, but they need to pace it in the way that it works for them. And we are there for that. And it's, in fact, one of the lesser known features of Ochre Sky is the one-on-one coaching that we do, and Raju does most of them. And that's very much paced according to the needs of the writer themselves.
How long have you been doing the workshops and how many writers have you facilitated in this journey so far?
Raju has a number for the number of writers, is it?
I think we've crossed 400 for sure, but maybe more. And yeah, yeah, 400 plus
Yeah,
from from December 2021, right?
yeah, December 2021, I started the first workshop, and 23 March is when Raju joined. So we've done 2 years together, and a year before that. So this is the fourth year starting.
Lovely. More power to you. And I do hope more and more writers sign up. It's not a plug. It's not a, it's not a branded episode. Let me tell everybody. I should have said this at the beginning, but this is because I have been through the journey and I strongly believe in the power of memoir and personal writing and personal stories. I'm a strong believer and a champion of it myself. And I know you're in safe hands once you walk into an Ochre Sky workshop. You will find parts of you which have never come across. You've never met that person. You will find that person. That's a guarantee. And you will emerge as a different avatar of yourself. And it's highly recommended. Thank you, Raju. Thank you,
Thank
Natasha,
you
for
so
your
much,
time.
Parna.
I
Thank
love
you
this.
so much. It's been such a brilliant start of the year with you.
Yes, and I love it, and I love this because I wanted to do, sort of bring you in because I started 365 days, 365 stories, and I wanted to sort of get you to start talking about it. And it's wonderful that I did this episode with you. Longest episode so far, and I'm going to keep it like this because we are two of you. So it's not just, it's the first time that I've got two guests together on the show.
Fair.
Absolutely fair, and I'm sure our listeners will listen. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you in your workshop again sometime soon.
It'll be lovely to have you.
Hi, this is Rituparna. Thank you for listening to the Storied Way Perspective. This is a bi monthly podcast where you will meet storytellers, influencers, entrepreneurs, coaches, thought leaders, and experts as I ask them what can stories do in the world today. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and everywhere else. Look out for the Storied Way Perspective with Rituparna. No matter where you listen to us, please rate, review, and share the podcast. This helps me know you are listening. You can also write to me at podcast@yourstorybag.com. I will wait to hear from you.